This grain contains more protein than wheat, more calcium than milk per calorie, and can produce more edible food per acre than rice in poor soil and drought. It was cultivated continuously for 8,000 years across 3 continents, formed the caloric backbone of the Aztec Empire, and was eaten daily by millions of people until 1519, when the Spanish conquest began. Then Hernán Cortés issued a decree. Anyone caught growing this crop would have their hands cut off. It was not a failure of agriculture. It was not a failure of nutrition. It was a deliberate extermination of knowledge, enforced by violence, because the grain had been used in ceremonies the Spanish considered heretical. Within a generation, it had nearly vanished from human memory. This is a grain that is not a true cereal. It does not belong to the grass family. The seeds are tiny, smaller than a millimeter in diameter, and grow in massive, drooping clusters that can be red, gold, orange, or purple. A single plant can produce 50,000 seeds or more. The entire plant is edible. The young leaves can be cooked like spinach. The mature seeds are harvested as grain. The plant grows tall, sometimes 6 feet or higher, and thrives in heat, in drought, in soil too poor for wheat or corn. Archaeological evidence places its domestication in Mesoamerica at least 8,000 years ago, possibly longer. By the time the Aztec civilization rose to power in the 14th century, this grain was already ancient. It was called huauhtli in Nahuatl, the Aztec language. It was planted alongside corn and beans in the milpa system, the carefully calibrated polyculture that sustained millions of people in the Valley of Mexico. But this grain was more than food. It was central to Aztec religious practice. The seeds were mixed with honey or human blood, formed into figures representing gods, and consumed in ritual ceremonies tied to the agricultural calendar. These were not peripheral rites. They were state ceremonies involving thousands of participants, held at temples in Tenochtitlan. The grain was woven into the cosmology of the empire. To grow it was to participate in the relationship between humans, the earth, and the divine. When Cortés and his forces arrived in 1519, they understood this. They saw the ceremonies, they saw the grain, and they recognized that to destroy Aztec religion, they would need to destroy the crops that enabled it. After the fall of Tenochtitlan in 1521, the Spanish began a systematic campaign to suppress the cultivation of this grain. It was not enough to ban the ceremonies. The plant itself had to be eliminated. Colonial records describe the prohibition. Fields were burned. Seeds were confiscated. Farmers caught growing the crop were punished, sometimes with mutilation, sometimes with death. The Spanish imposed wheat and barley in its place, crops that required different soil, different water, different knowledge. Wheat was a Christian grain. This grain was pagan. That distinction was enforced with violence. The ban was not universal across all of the Americas. In the mountains of Peru and Bolivia, a related grain continued to be grown by Andean peoples, though under increasing pressure from Spanish authorities. In remote villages in southern Mexico, in Oaxaca and Guerrero, small plots of this grain survived, hidden, passed down in families who remembered. But the large-scale cultivation that had fed the Aztec Empire ceased. The knowledge of how to process it, how to cook it, how to incorporate it into daily meals, that knowledge fractured and nearly disappeared. For 400 years, this grain existed only in fragments. It was grown in marginal areas by marginalized people. It was not exported. It was not studied. It was not included in the botanical catalogs that European scientists were compiling as they categorized the plants of the New World. The grain that had sustained an empire became invisible. In the early 1970s, a small number of researchers in the United States began investigating ancient crops of the Americas. They were looking for alternatives to the Green Revolution model, which relied on high inputs of water, fertilizer, and pesticides. They wanted to know if there were crops that had been passed over, crops that might be resilient in the face of climate instability and resource scarcity. This grain appeared in those investigations. Botanists traveled to remote villages in Mexico and the Andes, asking elders if they still grew it, if they still had seeds. Some did. The seeds were collected, brought back to research stations, and planted. What researchers found, when they analyzed the grain with modern methods, was striking. The protein content was 14 to 15% by weight, higher than wheat, nearly double that of rice. But it was not just the quantity of protein. It was the quality. This grain contains lysine, an essential amino acid that is nearly absent in wheat, corn, and rice. A diet based solely on wheat is protein deficient unless supplemented with legumes or animal products. A diet based on this grain is not. It is a complete protein, comparable to milk or meat in its amino acid profile. The grain is also rich in calcium, magnesium, and iron. Per calorie, it contains more calcium than milk. It contains more iron than wheat. It is high in fiber, in B vitamins, in folate. And it contains a compound called squalene, which is rare in plant foods and more commonly found in shark liver oil. Squalene is a precursor to cholesterol synthesis in the human body and has been studied for its potential role in immune function, though the mechanisms are not fully understood. But the most remarkable characteristic of this grain, from an agricultural perspective, is its efficiency. The plant uses a photosynthetic pathway called C4 carbon fixation, the same process that makes corn and sugarcane so productive. C4 plants are more efficient at converting sunlight and carbon dioxide into biomass than C3 plants like wheat and rice. They lose less water through their leaves, they grow faster in heat, they tolerate drought. In field trials conducted in the 1980s and 1990s, this grain was grown in marginal soils where wheat and rice failed. It was grown without irrigation in regions receiving less than 12 inches of rain per year. It was grown in saline soils, in depleted soils, in soils contaminated with heavy metals. In every case, it produced a harvest. Not always a large harvest, but a harvest. The plant did not quit. In optimal conditions, good soil, adequate water, the grain can produce yields comparable to or exceeding wheat. In poor conditions, it vastly outperforms conventional grains. This is not a marginal crop suited only to marginal land. This is a crop that thrives in marginality, but does not require it. The seeds are harvested when the flower heads dry and begin to shed. The traditional method involves cutting the stalks, bundling them, and threshing by hand, beating the stalks to release the seeds. The seeds are then winnowed, separating the tiny grains from the chaff. This process is labor-intensive. It does not scale easily to industrial agriculture. Combine harvesters, designed for wheat and corn, lose most of the seeds. Specialized equipment has been developed, but it is not widely available. Once harvested, the seeds require no hulling. Unlike rice or barley, there is no inedible outer layer to remove. The seeds can be cooked whole, boiled like rice, though they remain slightly crunchy. They can be ground into flour. They can be popped like popcorn. When heated, they turn inside out, creating tiny white puffs. This popping property was recognized by the Aztecs and is still used in Mexican cuisine to make a candy called alegría, where popped seeds are mixed with honey or sugar and pressed into bars. The flavor of the grain is earthy, slightly nutty, more assertive than rice or wheat. This was part of what kept it out of industrial food systems. Bland grains are versatile. They take on the flavor of whatever they are cooked with. This grain has its own character. In a global market that prioritized uniformity and neutrality, character was a disadvantage. The grain also presents challenges in baking. It contains no gluten, the protein network that gives wheat bread its structure. Flatbreads can be made, but they are dense, crumbly. Leavened bread requires wheat flour to be mixed in. For a food system built around wheat-based products, bread, pasta, pastries, this grain did not fit. It required different recipes, different techniques, different expectations. So even as it was rediscovered in the late 20th century, even as its nutritional superiority was documented, even as its resilience in harsh climates was proven, this grain remained niche. It was sold in health food stores, marketed as exotic, priced as premium. It did not displace wheat or rice. It did not return to being a staple, but it did return to being grown. Indigenous farmers in Mexico and the Andes expanded production. Seed companies in the United States began offering it to home gardeners. In India and Nepal, where related species had been grown continuously for thousands of years, cultivation increased. In China, the government began promoting it as part of food security initiatives. In East Africa, aid organizations introduced it as a drought-tolerant crop. The plant grows easily. Seeds are sown in late spring, after the last frost, directly in the soil. They germinate within days if the soil is warm. The plants grow rapidly, preferring heat. They need little water once established. They do not require fertilizer, though they grow larger with it. Pests generally leave them alone. The main challenge is weeds. The seedlings are small and can be overwhelmed in the early weeks. But once the plants reach a foot in height, they grow quickly, shading out competition. The flower heads begin to form in mid-summer, growing larger through late summer and early fall. They are dramatic, tall plumes of densely packed seeds, often brilliantly colored. Some varieties are grown purely as ornamentals, though the seeds remain edible. Harvest occurs when the seeds begin to fall from the heads naturally, usually in September or October, depending on climate. A small backyard plot can produce pounds of grain. A single plant can yield a quarter pound of seed or more. The leaves can be harvested throughout the growing season, cooked like spinach or chard. This dual-purpose quality, grain and greens, makes the plant especially valuable in subsistence agriculture. If the grain harvest fails, the leaves remain. If the leaves are eaten, the grain can still be harvested from the same plant. This grain is not rare. It is not difficult to obtain. Seeds are sold by dozens of seed companies, often under multiple varietal names. Some are selected for grain production, others for leaf production, others for ornamental value. All are edible. The plant has a name. It is called Amaranth. It is visible now in ways it was not a generation ago. It appears in farmers' markets, sometimes fresh as bundles of greens, sometimes as packaged grain. It appears in gluten-free flour blends. It appears in breakfast cereals, in energy bars, in products marketed toward endurance athletes. In Mexico, alegría bars are sold on street corners, the same food the Aztecs ate 500 years ago, continuous across centuries of suppression. Amaranth did not fail. It was not improved upon by wheat or corn or rice. It was violently suppressed, then economically sidelined, then culturally forgotten, but it was never gone. It waited in the hands of people who refused to stop growing it. In villages the colonial authorities could not fully control, in seeds stored in clay jars and passed between generations. The knowledge was always there. We just stopped looking.